Good afternoon. My name is Kurt Belaski, and today I'm going to discuss free trade agreements. Our agenda for today is going to be that we take a look at what an actual free trade agreement is. Then we're going to look at NAFTA, CAFTA, DR, take a look at some of the global impacts of free trade agreements, and then conclude along with our reference slide. So before we get to what a free trade agreement is, we have to take a look at what a trade agreement is. So a trade agreement is an international agreement between countries. It can be bilateral, meaning two countries, or it can be multilateral, meaning multiple countries. And what the trade agreement does is it regulates trade between countries. It regulates how tariffs are charged, how taxes are charged, the manner in which goods can be transported into and out of the country. Various other conditions of these trade agreements can go into effect as a result of signing such an agreement. Now, in order to make it a free trade agreement, what happens is that previous trade agreement becomes more expansive and establishes areas of free trade. So they're typically regionally based. They are typically eliminate tariffs or reduce tariffs to only affect certain items, however the countries agree. And that creates a area or a region of free trade between the countries. And that's what we're going to talk about today. So the first thing that we're going to discuss is NAFTA, the North American Free Trade Agreement. It's a free trade agreement between the United States, Canada, and Mexico. It's the largest trade agreement in the world. What makes it that large is the nearly $1 trillion worth of goods that are traded annually. And just a little bit of perspective, that's about 1.5 billion traded every day across the borders here in North America. Although NAFTA covers a wide variety of consumer goods, steel, agricultural goods, mostly the goods that are traded are agricultural and durable in nature. Next, we have the Central America Free Trade Agreement, including the Dominican Republic. It's a free trade agreement between the United States, Costa Rica, El Salvador, Guatemala, Honduras, Nicaragua, and the Dominican Republic. It establishes nearly free trade between the partners in the United States, and over $19 billion worth of goods are traded every year from the CAFTA partners to the United States. Unlike NAFTA, this is mostly textiles and some durable goods. As far as the imports, and of course we do export quite a bit of agriculture to them, but that's the nature of this agreement. Now for the global impact. Generally, free trade agreements are viewed as good in nature. There is a lot of contention though now, not only within politics, but economics, voters, Congress, and all sorts of people around the world that are starting to wonder and voice if free trade agreements are good. I believe that they are. Generally, these free trade agreements increase the wealth of nations. They allow for the reduction of trade barriers, which allows for nations to trade. Generally, nations get wealthier when they trade goods. So that's one reason why free trade agreements are good. Next is that you can write economic development chapters into these free trade agreements. These are starting to rise a little more in popularity, but essentially what they do is it allows for environmental and labor standards in developing countries to be raised through their adherence to the trading agreement. You can not demand, minimum wages that are equivalent to the United States standard, because that's not always achievable in most developing countries. However, you can increase those labor standards. You can increase environmental standards where they actually can't, just dump waste wherever they want. And through that, and through other means, countries can actually influence domestic policy within other countries. And you do that through the enforcement of conditions of the agreement. So if you don't like the way a country is conducting human rights or their environmental strategy or their labor standards, you can choose as a condition of the free trade agreement to not trade with that country until they meet their standards. This has worked in countries around the world recently. So those are three ways that not only globally impact that can not only have an impact on the globe, but that also can be a positive outcome from free trade agreements. So in conclusion, we discussed what a free trade agreement is. We talked about NAFTA, CAFTA-DR, and then we also discussed why I think free trade agreements are a good idea. And this is a list of the references that I used for this presentation. Thank you.